Today is probably the last day that Jonah Heim and Adolis Garcia are both on the Texas Rangers. And for all the reasons that might make sense on paper, it still sucks.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers, the first and best daily Rangers podcast. I'm Bryce Patrick, a creepingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 12 seasons, including all 7 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you already can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. On today's show, we're talking about Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim probably being gone, just remembering some of the great moments and a little bit of worry that so much of that 2023 World Series champion roster is already out the door 2 years later. Before we get into all that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, today is the non-tender deadline in Major League Baseball. If you are not going to tender a player that is headed for arbitration, a contract, this is the last day to do so without all of the extra penalties involved there. So basically, for all intents and purposes, this is probably the last day, one way or another, that Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim are going to be on the Texas Rangers. Now, maybe Adolis ends up staying. I am still hopeful that ends up being the case. Jonah Heim, it feels like there's not really a chance of that happening. It's possible other guys get non-tendered. It's possible Josh Sborz ends up becoming that. And if the Rangers have to lose the guy who won them the most iconic game in the history of the franchise, won them the most iconic postseason series in the history of the franchise, and also their first World Series championship, the guy who won the ALCS MVP in the only silver boot postseason series matchup, that's going to suck, especially if they lose the guy who threw the final pitch of the first ever World Series championship and the guy who he threw it to. All 3 of those could be gone and probably will. Well, at least 2 of those 3, I think, will almost assuredly be gone by the end of the day. This was written by Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News in a big column talking about basically the end of the tenure of Adolis and Jonah Heim. It all sums up to say the Rangers have 38 players currently on their 40-man roster. By the time rosters are set on Friday, it's likely to be at least 2 less one way or another. All the signs point to Heim and Garcia being gone. And I've talked ad nauseum about why a lot of the baseball reasons make sense, at least more so for Jonah Heim than I think they do about Adolis Garcia. I've talked about those till I was blue in the face, and then I kept on talking. Jonah Heim projected to make about $6 million in arbitration this year. He's been the worst offensive player in baseball, or at least one of them, for the last 2 years. He is not providing the same level of defensive value, and the Rangers could go spend that $6 million elsewhere in a way that could probably help the team a little bit more, maybe save some on catcher, or at least just get an upgrade on what they've been getting from Jonah Heim. But for Adolis, it's a little bit different of a drop-off there. If he was awful defensively again this year, like he was in 2024, and had the offensive drop-off, then it'd be a much easier choice to say, hey, $12 million is a bit much for a guy who is not that valuable a player. In 2024, had a 0.3 baseball reference WAR season. This year, 2.7 WAR season. The Rangers are more likely to get trade value from Adolis than they are with Jonah. Maybe some team values Jonah a little bit in the defense he provides there. But I think Adolis, with what Taylor Ward fetched the Angels in a trade, the Angels, not exactly the most competent franchise, not exactly the best trading franchise, got basically a really good starting pitcher with a lot of injury concerns over the last couple of years, and Grayson Rodriguez from the Orioles, who has multiple years of control. I believe 3 years of team control left for a guy who is in his early 30s, coming off a 2.7 baseball reference WAR season. A guy who there are some concerns of if he's going to hold up for that. He's going to make about $11 million versus Adolis Garcia making $12 million this year. It's a comparable type of a player. And so the value maybe should be comparable in the return. But I don't really want to talk about all of that right now. I just want to remember the good times, the best times with two players that were integral in the Rangers making the World Series championship, their first ever championship ever, winning the first championship ever, hoisting that trophy, celebrating in the parade, popping all the bubbly, and just truly an iconic season for the ages that the Rangers have not been able to recapture the magic of the last couple of years, which is why these moves are happening. But I just want to start with Adolis Garcia's journey. Just the way that he even got here, the way that he made his appearance on the Rangers is just a wild story. A guy didn't make his big league debut till 25 with the Cardinals after playing several years in Japan, coming over from Cuba, getting a big bonus from the Cardinals and not really living up to it. The Cardinals just cut bait with him, gave him up on wires. The Rangers claimed him for, I believe it was 250 or 500K. What an incredible investment for the Rangers to make in Adolis Garcia. Made his debut for about 3 seconds in 2020 that I have literally zero memory of. Not a singular memory of Adolis Garcia doing anything in 2020. Then comes 2021, and in spring training, he's fantastic. He's awesome in spring training, but the Rangers are saving that last roster spot for Mike freaking Foltynewicz, who was truly horrendous that season. And the Rangers said, nope, we're going to cut you off our 40-man roster. You are just going to be subject to waivers, and nobody else picked him up. Nobody else picked up Adolis Garcia, and he crushed it for the first month in AAA, comes up, has an iconic first couple of weeks with the Rangers, including just some incredibly clutch home runs in Tampa Bay at the Trop against his best friend, Randy Arozarena. And he finishes up there in Rookie of the Year voting, finishes fourth in Rookie of the Year voting, makes the All-Star game in 2021, is really one of the lone bright spots of a horrendous 2021 campaign for the Texas Rangers, where things just looked awful. And then for the next 3 years, he was awesome. I mean, he was a 4-win player in 2021. He was an all-star again in 2023, a 39 homer season, over 100 RBIs in 22 and in 23. He was a Gold Glover in 23, got MVP votes in 23, had the singular greatest postseason run I've ever seen a player have. I mean, truly, it was exceptional. It's not just the RBI totals, not just the home run totals, but just the pizzazz with which he played the game, the zest for life he brought to the sport of baseball, a sport that can be dull at times, can be boring if you're not really as locked into every single moment of what's happening. But Adolis Garcia and his incredible moments, I mean, from basically every walk-off moment he had was just an absolute celebration from the time that the ball left the bat. The guy just played with that kind of exuberance for baseball that you don't see everywhere in the game. And you especially don't see a whole lot on this Texas Rangers squad that is more businesslike, more, boring, for lack of a better word. They are a little bit like baseball robots. And when they're good at baseball, that's a lot more fun to watch than when they're bad at baseball. But Adolis Garcia, no matter whether the Rangers are good or bad, he is a human highlight reel with some of the defensive plays he was making this year. And heck, even his last home run being such an incredible tape measure homer in Cleveland against the Guardians, a team that was fighting for their playoff lives, a game-tying homer because Adolis Garcia was such an incredibly clutch individual. And when I show my kids baseball highlights one day to try and get them into baseball, God willing, they are into baseball, I'm not going to show them clips of Marcus Semien all that much. Maybe I'll show them a little bit of Jacob deGrom, and I'll show them Nathan Eovaldi. I'll show them Corey Seager being the efficient baseball robot, and I'll try and nerd out about why that's exciting. But I'm going to start with Adolis Garcia highlights because this guy, you do not have to know ball to know that Adolis Garcia is great at baseball, that he is fun to watch, that he brings that joy that reminds you of why you love this game. Watching Adolis Garcia is fun. It is exciting. It is a joy to watch. It is like Adrian Beltre, not quite similar, but in that no matter what was happening, if Adrian Beltre was on your team, you're going to have fun watching baseball. It is going to be exciting. It is going to be a worthwhile investment to sit down in front of your TV for 2.5 to 3 hours and watch a baseball game, because Adolis Garcia is going to do something fun. He's going to do something exciting. He's going to do something that reminds you why you love this sport. And at the end of the day, whatever reasons there are for sending off Adolis Garcia in a trade or just straight up DFAing him, which would be, I feel, just not only incredibly disrespectful, just not a great allocation of resources and roster spots. At the end of the day, just sucks because we are no longer going to get to watch Adolis Garcia play baseball for the Texas Rangers. And for whatever reasons that happens, it still freaking sucks. This show is brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season's back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium, surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Gametime. It's the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Whether you want to go check out a Mavs game or a Stars game while they're still at the AAC, Gametime is the best way to get tickets to all of those sporting games, or whether you wanted to go to, see a theater show, you wanted to go see a comedy show, you wanted to go see a concert, whatever you're looking to get tickets to, Gametime is the best way to get tickets for all those live events. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Start that every day thinking Locked On Rangers first every single day. On Monday's show, I'll be back and talking about the ramifications of from whatever happens with Adolis Garcia and Jonah Heim. The deadline is today for that non-tender deadline, whether it's actually at 3 p.m. or it's at 6 p.m. I don't think I'm going to do a big major episode on that. Unless the Rangers get some massive haul, then I'll probably do something. I don't have a whole lot going on tonight, so we'll see what the content schedule looks like next week. But all of that and more on next week's episodes of Locked On Rangers. Just keep it tuned to my Twitter feed or Blue Sky feed or whatever. I'll let you know if I'm doing an episode. But I want to talk about Jonah Heim now, the catcher that caught the final pitch of the Rangers World Series championship. And what a roundabout way he took to get to the Texas Rangers. I mean, this guy had a long journey to get to the major leagues in general. He was with three different organizations. He was on his third organization before he made his big league debut, and the Rangers are his fourth, and he may be with the fifth by the end of this week, probably by the end of today. Jonah Heim was drafted in the fourth round by the Baltimore Orioles, to spend time with Tampa Bay as well, then moved on to Oakland, spent about 5 seconds with Oakland before being traded to the Texas Rangers in what was one of the great final trades of the John Daniels tender. Back on December 19th of 2017, the Tampa Bay Rays, that was what sent him to Oakland. In February 6th of 2021, the Oakland A's traded Dane Acker, Chris Davis, for those of you longtime listeners, you know who I'm talking about, to the Rangers for Elvis Andrus, Erasmus Ramirez, and cash considerations. Shout out to cash considerations for getting that trade done. It was mainly just a salary swap, salary dump, because Chris Davis was making a whole lot more money than Elvis Andrus at the time. The A's needed a shortstop, and Elvis Andrus was fine for them. They said, this Jonah Heim guy, I don't know if he'll be any good, so let's go ahead and just send him over your way. And boy, the Rangers got a lot out of him for the 2 seasons where he was at his best in 2021. Wasn't particularly great, but he had some moments of brilliance there. I mean, defensively, he was an astoundingly good catcher in 2021. The framing, he was truly exceptional. Doesn't count into what his baseball reference score was, which is why it was negative 0.1 for the 82 games he played in that season. Him and Jose Trevino splitting the catching duties in that season. But in 2021, right around the trade deadline, actually right after the trade deadline on July 31st, Jonah Heim hit his first ever walk-off home run. It was a magical moment. The Rangers had just traded Joey Gallo. Truly, in my own baseball fandom, I have never been more sports depressed than the trade deadline in 2021. I mean, for those of you who've been listening to this show for really any time at all, you probably know that Joey Gallo is my favorite Texas Ranger of all time. My favorite baseball player, my favorite athlete of all time, non-Dirk edition, is Joey Gallo. And the Rangers just cutting bait with him, saying, we don't think this guy's worth it. We think this guy sucks it. And, we're not going to pay anybody any money, even though they spent the entirety of the 2021 season talking about, hey, look at all these free agents that are going to be on the board this winter. Look at the Corey Seagers, the Marcus Simeons. We're definitely going to go and spend on one of those guys. And I said, no, you're not. No, you're not. The Rangers had a terrible farm system at that point. They had very few young, good players to get excited about at that point. There was just not a whole lot of hope for the 2021 Rangers. There were no great pitching prospects. Nick Solak was really not working out. Joey Gallo was kind of the lone piece where you felt like you could really build around. Rugen and Odor was still around, but he was still in his mid-20s at that point, but it was starting to look like, wow, that career is going to burst up into flames pretty quickly, and it ended up doing exactly that. Jonah Heim was there. Adolis Garcia was breaking out, and it was like, okay, but in the second half, Adolis Garcia was really rough in that second half of his first full year of 2021. But on the night of the trade deadline, when I thought, all right, this is the most depressed I've ever been watching a Texas Rangers game outside of Game 7 of that 2011 World Series, most depressing regular season game I had watched, Jonah Heim comes up with a massive spirits lifting walk-off homer. And I thought, okay, that's nice. There is some moments of joy that are left in this baseball season. That's probably the last one I'm going to get this season. But you know what? I appreciate you, Jonah Heim, for lifting my spirits. And then the very next day, what do they do? But they walk it off again. An Andy Ibanez 2-run tying homer in the 9th inning against the Seattle Mariners. And then Jonah Heim says, hey, what if I did that walk-off homer one more time? And he did exactly that, lifting my spirits and Rangers Nation spirits yet again. Probably, I think I was the most depressed after that Joey Gallo trade. I still yearn for my son to return home and to return to the form. It was a guy hitting 40 home runs and playing Gold Glove defense, but I digress talking about Joey Gallo. It happens from time to time. But Jonah Heim lifting spirits in that moment was truly, it was such a special moment and something I will genuinely always be grateful to Jonah Heim for. Like for the rest of my life, I mean, what he did in the World Series championship, leading the Rangers in the ways that he did, coming up so clutch in that 2023 World Series run. I mean, the first half, he was an incredible hitter, absolutely deserved to be an all-star, deserved to be a Gold Glover in that season. Second half was tough, coming back from injuries a little bit prematurely. Didn't do all that much hitting-wise in the postseason, but started every single game of that postseason at catcher. That takes a huge toll on your body. He had already caught 100 plus games in the regular season, played in 131 games, over 500 plate appearances in the regular season of 2023. And then he went and caught every single inning of the postseason outside of, I think, the 2 that Austin Hedges caught in that World Series. But this guy was truly something special that season. And he's given the Rangers some great, great moments. I mean, having a switch hitting catcher that hit for power, that's a big reason why the Rangers lineup was so darn good in 2023. I mean, Jonah Heim at points was hitting, as high as, 5th or 6th in that lineup. At times he was hitting 8th or 9th, but when you're 8th or 9th place hitter, I guess really 8th place hitter, because Leote was the Rangers' everyday center fielder batting 9th for the majority of that 2023 season. But if an all-star switch hitting catcher with some pop is your number 8 hitter, that is truly a scary, scary lineup. And that's what the Rangers were in 2023. And they don't do that without Jonah Heim in 2023. And not to mention Jonah Heim's maybe most iconic moment. There were some other great moments. He had some other walk-offs. He had some other, I believe at least another walk-off home run. He had a couple of home runs in the postseason in Houston, some truly beautiful swings there. And one singular, just cherry on top home run in the World Series after everything was pretty much already said and done. But what I remember most about Jonah Heim, his most iconic moment to me was in that 2023 season in a series against the Chicago White Sox, where he literally just the night before had been completely done over by a horrendous overturn of a call at home plate, called for blocking the plate, ends up being the game-winning run, losing to the White Sox in 2023. Not a good time to lose to the White Sox, that like there was ever a good time to lose to the White Sox. Jonah Heim did not take that lying down, because the next day he hits the game-winning homer. And as he's rounding the bases, just does the little touching his ears signal like they do when they are calling for, like managers do when they are calling for a challenge to go and replay review. Jonah Heim says, hey, replay review both of these homers. Or I guess just one singular homer. But that was the energy with which Jonah Heim rounded those bases, touching his ears, saying, hey, you can't review that. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it and maybe choke on it, because that was the kind of bile that Jonah Heim was bringing when he absolutely crushed that homer. Just a rare moment of personality from a guy who didn't always show all that much on the field. Definitely gave it all for the Rangers when he was out there. Not a whole lot of great success the last couple years at the plate, but for what he brought defensively, for what he brought to that pitching staff, and for what he brought in the 2023 World Series, I will be forever grateful for the good times and the bad times of Jonah Heim as a Texas Ranger. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Let's look at some of these odds that FanDuel has for the NHL, because I don't think that you want to hear me read about what the Mavericks odds are to win the NBA Finals. They are, let's just say, not good at this moment. Right now, the Stars are behind the Edmonton Oilers for the 7th best odds to win the Stanley Cup right now at plus 1,300, even after an incredible game last night in Canada, looking just truly exceptional against the Canucks. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now, this is a trend for this Texas Rangers team of just letting these guys go because they get a little bit too expensive. And it's going to be the start of a lot of whining and moaning and complaining from ownership, a group that is run by a billionaire, to try and convince you that they are incredibly poor. It is just a very frustrating effort. And it's not only frustrating because it's really annoying to hear people who have all the money and wealth that you could possibly spend in several lifetimes try and convince you who are giving them money for this sport, for this team, that they are so poor. But it's also frustrating because it's the antithesis of how the Texas Rangers won the 2023 World Series. They won the 2023 World Series because they said, hey, there's a market inefficiency out there. This is the new Moneyball. The new Moneyball is just spending an appropriate amount of money for what good players cost. Now, free agency is always a gamble. It is always a gamble. And if you sign a player to a contract longer than 3 years, heck, usually longer than 4, because there aren't a whole lot of 4-year contracts. If you sign a player to contract longer than 3 years, heck, even a 3-year contract sometimes, the back end is going to look bad. It is going to be an older player who is underperforming, who is not living up to that salary. And that is just the nature of the game. That is how the game works, because you have guys on the front end who are making way less than they should be making, and they earn those career earnings by what they have done in the past to be fairly compensated, kind of overcompensated toward the back end, because you don't get free agents that often. They are hard to sign free agents. It is very hard to sign free agents. What the Rangers did in that winter of 2021 was so incredible, because it is very difficult to convince for multiple very good free agents to sign with your team. And it is even harder to do when you're coming off of several years of mediocrity at that point. I mean, the Rangers were beyond bad. They were boring. They were boring and bad. They were directionless. They were rudderless. They were embarrassing. I mean, in 2020, they headed into that season thinking, yeah, we've got this three-headed monster at the top of our rotation. We got Corey Kluber, we got Mike Minor, we got Lance Lynn, we've got hitters, we've got Joey Gallo, and other people will also maybe hit. I still don't know how they thought that offense was going to compete heading into the 2020 season, but they did. They thought, oh, the first year of this new stadium, we'll get all these fans in here, and COVID won't happen, but it did. And thankfully for the Rangers, COVID happened when it did. Not thankful for COVID, but for their team planning standpoint, it worked out where they only had to start their tank. They only had to really, truly be horrendous for 30 games and then for the full year of 2021. I mean, the back half of 2020 and then in 2021. That's very lucky on them. But heading into that season, they talked all year long in 2021 about how, there's so many good free agents in this free agent class. There are so many good free agents in this free agent class, and we're going to spend a whole bunch of money because the payroll was just way below where it should have been in 2021. It was not anywhere near what the market size dictates that it should be. They were in the bottom 10 of payroll, which is just truly embarrassing for a team in this big of a market that had that much success in seasons past. You could say, oh, hey, they were building a new stadium. Oh, they had all those expenses of building a new stadium. Yeah, but the city of Arlington paid for half of it. And also, no one made them build a new stadium. That was their choice to do that. But they needed splashy big free agents to come in and renew their vision. Their vision was, hey, nobody's really spending big money on these big money free agents. If you just pay them what they're worth, like, hey, you go offer Corey Seager a 10-year contract, not a whole lot of other teams were going to be willing to doing that. And, well, here we are, 2 years after the first World Series championship and, 3.5, 4 years after they offered him that contract, and the Rangers already have that first World Series ring that they never had before. They're also not that far removed from signing Marcus Semien. And then following that up the next winter by signing Jacob deGrom, by bringing in Bruce Bochy, by signing Nathan Eovaldi and Andrew Heaney and John Gray, which was the season before that. But there were other signings as well, other big money signings. And then at the deadline, the Rangers went all in and said, hey, I know Max Scherzer's making a whole lot of money. We'll give you a prospect and we'll eat a decent chunk of that money. Or at least, I guess the Mets will eat a decent chunk of that money for giving up a prospect. But we don't care about how much Max Scherzer is going to be making in 2024 because he gives us a chance to win the World Series in 2023. And we'll take on Jordan Montgomery. We'll give up some top prospects for a Jordan Montgomery. And we'll go for it because going for it is the market inefficiency. So many teams around Major League Baseball are just, half butting it. They are not really giving their all to go in and try and win. They're about 3 to 5 teams every year that are really actually all in, trying everything they can to win. Usually it's the really, really big market teams. The Dodgers have been very, very all in for the last couple of years. The Yankees have no choice but to be all in every single year. The Phillies are nearing the end of their aging window, so they are giving every single resource they can do to win every single game for the last 3 years. The Astros are looking less so like that now than they had been in years past. The Blue Jays are very much going to be one of those all-in teams. But right now, there's not all that many other teams that are super duper all in on winning right now. Even the Padres, less so this year and maybe last year with the sale of the team, with the death of Peter Seidler. There's just not as many teams that are as all in on winning. And should the Rangers be acting like, we are one of the top dogs, we are one of the big markets, we are one of the teams that should have a big old budget to spend, they could be reassuring a lot of these issues. They could be fixing a lot of these issues with their team, of their bullpen, of shoring up the depth of their rotation, maybe adding a bat, an impact bat, anywhere, literally anywhere. But they're probably not going to be doing that. And it is so frustrating because we just watched it work. It's not like they tried this effort, they tried this way of signing big free agents and, bringing in these older guys on some of these, bigger money deals, knowing eventually it will look bad. But for right now, when you have the Corey Seager in his prime with 2 World Series MVPs, one of them with your team, with Jacob deGrom healthy and good, with Nathan Eovaldi coming off the best season you've ever seen him have, with Jack Leiter coming off of an incredible season, and heck, with 2 young outfielders in Evan Carter and Wyatt Langford, both of whom have all-star potential. One of them a little closer to all-star than the other one. Evan Carter, if he's healthy and if he can hit lefties worth a lick, that's an all-star player. Both pre-arbitration guys. All of this sets up for this is your window now. And watching them sabotage that by crying poor and saying, oh, yeah, we can't afford $6 million for a catcher, even though in that very same article where Evan Grant was saying, oh, yeah, the Rangers definitely can't afford Jonah Heim and his $6 million. They're going to go get a different backup catcher for $6 to $7 million in Victor Caratini. Now, granted, I think that's a little bit wiser of investment in a backup catcher, but still, that's still basically the same price. And to say, oh yeah, they can go spend $6 to $7 million on a backup catcher, not even an everyday player, but a backup catcher. But there's no way in heck they could spend $12 million on a guy who was one of the most valuable defensive players in the league last year, who still hit 19 home runs, who still drove in, I believe, 80 runs. It was the most runs driven in by anybody on this roster. 75 runs, which was by far the most runs driven in. This guy, no matter what he's doing, Adolis Garcia is still going to find a way to drive in runs, and he's still bringing value defensively. But saying, oh yeah, they can't afford Jonah Heim $6 million, but they can afford $7 million on Victor Caratini. But they definitely can't afford $12 million on an everyday starting player. They're just going to throw these guys out there who are not very tested, and I don't think are ready in Alejandro Ozuna to be an everyday player at age 23. I don't think he's ready just yet. I think eventually he might be an everyday player, but I don't think there's going to be any version of Alejandro Ozuna that's anywhere close to the ceiling or even like the mid ceiling of Adolis Garcia. Not even talking about the 39 homer, ALCS dominant, like 2023 postseason dominant streak of Adolis Garcia. But I don't think the best version of Alejandro Ozuna is getting close to the 2021 version of Adolis Garcia. That was a 3.5, 4-win player and an all-star. I don't think that he's getting there. And I think that trying to paint the picture that they are so poor and that this strategy of spending on free agents, there's no way they could do that when they literally just did is the most frustrating part about this whole offseason is that they just did this strategy. It just worked. And instead of doing it again, they're going to say, hey, one's all you get, and that will do it. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.